Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty, coming to you from the hills overlooking beautiful and picturesque Monterey Bay, and bringing you the news behind the news, the story behind the story. Hoping to convince you that reality is usually scoffed at, that illusion is usually king, but in the battle for survival of Western civilization, it's going to be reality, not illusion or delusion, that'll determine what the future will bring. And I need to remind you the views expressed here are not necessarily those of the owners, management, staff, sponsors, or supporters of the station you're listening to. They happen to be my views, and well, for the next hour, they're going to be the views of our good friend Joel Skousen from the World Affairs Brief. Hi, Joel. How are we doing?
I'm just fine, Stan. Good to be with you again.
Well, what are we going to be talking about this afternoon? I mean, there's so many exciting things going on in the world today, but what are the major stories in the latest World Affairs Brief?
Well, you're right, Stan. There is a tremendous amount going on, a lot of stories, and I'm kind of taking a bigger picture view this week in the World Affairs Brief. I'm going to talk about the sudden rise of Donald Trump and his real agenda is toward the presidency. Frankly, I saw rats, Stan. The sudden appearance of Donald Trump on the political scene, pretending to be both a Republican and an independent, combined with an inordinate amount of free media and false media polling, indicates that the establishment is once again trying to split the mass of voters, taking aim at Barack Obama in 2012. Now, they hired Ross Perot to run an independent campaign to unseat the Republican George H.W. Bush in 1992, and it worked. Later, they brought him out again to split opposition to Bill Clinton to ensure a second term. Trump, with his billions of his money to spend, appears to be taking on the same strategy as Perot. This is the strongest evidence so far that the powers that be intend to give us 4 more years of Obama posture. But, Donald, go ahead.
You go right ahead. No, I think that's fascinating, and I certainly concur with you that nothing as it appears to be. You go right ahead.
Well, Donald Trump is not a serious candidate, but that doesn't mean he can't do political damage to the Tea Party rebellion, which has always been in danger of being co-opted. He's a loudmouth, egotistical buffoon who has no respect among thinking people. The same was true of Arnold Schwarzenegger, but look what the establishment was able to do with him to your detriment in California. Normally, a candidate with a weirdly coiffed hairdo and a stupid reality show like Trump had his apprentice wouldn't be given the time of day by the media. But combine that with Trump's promotion of the birther issue, of course, I'm talking about Obama's lack of a hospital-recorded or signed birth certificate, and you've got a recipe for extreme ridicule and derision. But no, instead, Trump is given huge, mostly positive press. Well, it's interesting to postulate why Trump picked the issue of Obama's ineligibility to jumpstart his campaign. It's a burning issue with many Americans, that fully 1/3 of the public doubts that Obama is eligible to be president, though far fewer than seem to be upset by it. It's a serious charge that is absolutely true, but no other Republican candidate will touch it, and that's what gives Trump a leg up politically, at least as far as attracting away those who are frustrated with the lackluster performance of the Republican opposition in Congress. But as Politico.com pointed out, Donald Trump's birther crusade could be a boon in Iowa. A whopping, get this, Stan, 48% of Iowa Republicans said they don't believe Obama was born in the United States. Another 26% said they weren't sure whether or not the president was born in America, as the Constitution requires for the highest eligibility of office.
Well, but the thing is, could anybody really want to imagine President Donald Trump? I mean, this would be just so ridiculous. Suddenly he has no administrative experience as far as this. He's had all sorts of failed business deals and bankruptcies and marriages. And, I mean, he would make us the laughing stock of the world.
Indeed, that's true. It's a fate that the establishment media won't allow the real truth on Obama's Kenyan birth to surface. But in spite of that bias, they certainly aren't showing any tendency to crucify Trump on his claims as they would be doing to any credible conservative. In fact, globalist Rupert Murdoch...
Hold that thought. Well, this is Dr. Stan here at Radio Liberty. Our guest this afternoon, Joel Skousen. And Joel is talking about the presidential candidacy of Donald Trump. And really, of course, the fact that the only thing that Trump has is the fact that he has certainly taken on the issue of whether or not President Obama, was really born in the Hawaiian Islands or whether he was born in Kenya. Other than that, of course, certainly it would appear that Donald Trump is trying to usurp the Tea Party movement and certainly neutralize any effort at all to take America back. And of course, Trump is getting serious consideration. This is what's so ridiculous. The mass media is playing him up as if he is a potentially serious candidate, not attacking him and belittling him and demonizing him as they would with everybody else who questions whether or not President Obama was really legitimately an American citizen, born in America and eligible to run for the presidency. So pick up the story, please.
Well, even ghost Rupert Murdoch, who owns Fox News, gave Trump his own time slot to promote himself. Now, all of this could change with the emergence of Jerome Corsi's new book with all the latest investigative facts surrounding Obama's true identity. The new blockbuster is called Where's the Birth Certificate? The case that Barack Obama is not eligible to be president. The Drudge Report gave big play this week, quoting the publisher saying, "It's utterly devastating. Obama himself could learn things to know about himself." Now, that isn't stopping the establishment from corralling the wagons and getting high-profile people to downplay the issue of Obama's falsified birth in Hawaii. Compromised Republican Speaker of the House John Boehner responded to media queries by saying Obama's birth certificate of live birth from Hawaii, quote, "was good enough for me." Well, it's not good enough for the rest of us, given that anyone can walk into a Hawaii state office and declare that they're the mother of a child born outside of a hospital. In fact, Hawaii has a reputation for attracting foreigners who travel to the state to falsely declare a birth there and gain U.S. citizenship for the children. That's a certificate of live birth. The trouble is, Obama claims to have been born in a hospital, which would have generated a doctor-signed long-form birth certificate, which is not what his campaign is passing on to the press. Neither Oahu's operating hospitals mentioned by the family have any record of Obama's birth or the presence of his mother. Publishing a notice of birth in a Honolulu newspaper is not proof either, as those come from the parents. A blogger who goes by the name of Blue Corn, pretty good facts about Obama's or the Hawaii system. Obama was not, he said, registered at a center used by the hospitals, but registered at a center, an outlying area used by Hawaiian natives, proving he was most probably not born at a Hawaiian hospital.
Hold that thought. Of course, Joel is just talking about the fact that there's a very serious concern that Barack Obama was not born in Hawaii, that he was born elsewhere, and that his mother actually got a certificate of live birth, but that is not like a birth certificate, and certainly this apparently is pretty standard operating procedure. If you have a child born in another country, but you want him to be an American citizen, you go to Hawaii, you get a certificate of live birth. Had he been born in a hospital, there would have been a birth certificate. And of course, he insists he was born in a hospital, but there's no birth certificate. He was born at home, certainly you get a certificate of live birth. But obviously there is a serious question whether Barack Obama is eligible to become the President of the United States. The media plays this down because, of course, the media is controlled by the establishment, and they put Barack Obama in. I mean, where do you think all the almost $500 million came from that was used, of course, to get him elected? From the people of great wealth who want him there at this time in history. But you go right ahead with this story.
Well, as I say, it's important because if he were born in a hospital, of course, the hospital sends their registrations to the same place all the time, and that's not where his registration came from. In fact, registrations are accepted by mail, so his mother could have registered him that way. No one had to swear to anything. Their word was taken as gospel, and what a way to get U.S. citizenship with all of its perks. Hawaii Governor Neil Abercrombie stepped deeper into the cow pies this week by claiming the impossible, that Abercrombie told Hawaii News that he first laid eyes on baby Barack Obama a few days after he was born, claiming that Obama's parents introduced their newborn to friends at the University of
Hold on.
where Abercrombie was going to college.
Go right ahead. Go right ahead.
We not only saw him and were with him, he said, this is Abercrombie, Democratic governor of Hawaii, but we were introduced to him, of course, at our gatherings, our student gatherings. And, of course, over the years, then he was raised by his mother and his grandparents. We, of course, saw him frequently because he was with his grandfather all the time. Well, Hawaii readers were quick to refute those claims. Quote, there are records that Stan Durham didn't hang out in Hawaii to enjoy all those student gatherings, as Abercrombie suggests, writes one Hawaiian. She was in Washington State as a student, leaving her polygamous husband behind in the Aloha State. So where did they live as a couple in Hawaii, Neil? Can you take us there and point it out? Of course, Neil Abercrombie is just making this up all up. In fact, at one point he stated that he first met him when he was 4 years old, and now he's contradicting that. A blogger named Blue Corn, complained that Abercrombie is lying. When he first started hunt for the birth certificate, he claimed there was no long form. His friends, the entertainment reporter, blabbed it all about it over a radio show one day, included the little tidbit that Abercrombie's first recollection of Obama was 4 years old playing t-ball. Now all of a sudden he remembers the kid was only a few days old. Big cover-up here. Obama was born in early August. I'm surprised that there are many people around the school in August. Good point. Schools aren't even didn't even start in those days until September. The mother was a student who took her child to Washington State to enroll in school 2 weeks after the birth. Stanley Ann Dunham was enrolled at the University of Washington for autumn of 1961, which means she had to be there on August 18th during the time that Abercrombie claims he was hobnobbing with the Obamas at the University of Hawaii. And in those days, new mothers were kept in the hospital for at least 5 days. That means that Stanley Ann went home on August 9th, enrolled in the University of Washington on August 18th. Does the new baby in need of the Hawaiian sun use those 9 days to party and to lug around the new baby to introduce him to the university community? No. Abercrombie lied and got caught in that lie. Well, besides the testimony of Ambassador of Kenya to the U.S. on live radio that was born in Kenya, we have the testimony of Obama's grandmother. Quote, on August 4th, 1961, Obama's mother, father, and grandmother were attending a Muslim festival in Mombasa, Kenya. Mother had been refused entry to airplanes due to a 9-month pregnancy. It was a hot August day in the festival, so the Obamas went to the beach to cool off while in the ocean. His mother experienced labor pains, so was rushed to the Coast Provincial General Hospital, Mombasa, Kenya, where Obama was born at 7:21 on August 4th. 4 days later, his mother flew to Hawaii and registered his birth in Honolulu as a certificate of live birth, which omitted the place and hospital of birth because there was none, except in Kenya. So that's what really happened. Of course, Trump doesn't have all these details, so perhaps he's a harmless foil in the movement against Obama's eligibility. But still, allowing Trump to have significant airtime on this issue is a glaring exception to the media's virulent and hidden policy of denigrating anything that smacks of conspiracy, including this multi-million-dollar cover-up of Obama's background, including silencing the universities where he attended so that it wouldn't be known that he registered under Obama Soweto and used a foreign and got a scholarship as a foreign student. That can only mean that there's a concerted plan to draw off many hardcore independents and a portion of constitutional conservatives who are angry and disgusted enough with the mainstream Republicans to go with an independent vote. Well, that's exactly what Ross Perot did in 1992 and 1996. He came out in favor of hardcore policies like balancing the federal budget, stopping abortions, ending outsourcing of mobs, and opposing gun control, which he had no intention of pursuing if elected. But as soon as he became a potential candidate, he was polling close to the two major party candidates, and with a little help from the media, successfully put the Democrats in office and kept them there for 8 years. What makes Trump's opposition to Obama so ludicrous is his history of political contributions to the Democrats and liberal Republicans, not to mention prior positions in favor of abortion and dozens of other liberal causes. I know you've interviewed D.B. Kidd several times. She was writing for newswithviews.com this week and had perhaps the best background piece on Trump. Have you seen that, Stan?
No, I haven't. Would you go ahead and give us the rundown on it?
Yeah, in typical acerbic style, she excoriated Trump for his business dishonesty, dozens of lawsuits against him, political donations to liberals in support of left liberal causes. She says, since 1990 election cycle, the top 100 recipients of Trump's political contributions number 6 Democrats and 4 Republicans. In battle for up Representative Charlie Rangel, Democrat of New York, who was sent last year by his House Representatives, has received the most Trump money, totaling $24,000. The most recent contribution from Trump to Rangel was a $10,000 gift during the 2006 election cycle. The top Republican recipient of Trump's money is none other than Senator Don McCain, an estimate to real conservatives, who has collected $13,600 from the billionaire magnet, the second most of any politician. Next comes Senator Majority Leader Harry Reid, has received the 4th largest amount, including $4,800 in the successful campaign against Tea Party favorite Engel. In total, Trump has contributed $10,400 to Reid. However, the nearly $420,000 Trump has donated to committees. The largest recipient has been the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee with $116,000. Does this sound like an independent to you? He's no more independent than Ross Perot was, who, by the way, was constantly, phone records show, in constant, almost daily contact with the Democratic National Committee while he was running his independent campaign. Trump, according to D.V. Kidd, has given money to John Kerry, Tom Daschle, Joe Biden, Harry Reid, Rahm Emanuel, Hillary Clinton, Anthony Weiner, Charles Schumer, and Kirsten Gillibrand. All pro-abortion politicians who support homosexuals and lesbians. What does that tell you about his value, Krista?
Well, I'm afraid that Donald Trump is not going to get my vote under any circumstances, but go right ahead.
Well, Donald Trump has advocated for massive tax increases that display a stunning lack of knowledge on how to create jobs. He has in the past expressed support for positions that are now embraced by liberals, including abortion rights, though he has since said he's pro-life. The Celebrity Post also supported then Democratic presidential candidate Hillary Clinton. Trump advocated for universal health care in his 2000 book, The America We Deserve, writing that the goal should be to, quote, make reforms for the moment and long-term to find an equivalent of the single-payer plan that is affordable, well-administered, and provides freedom of choice in other countries. I mean, who is he kidding? Trump was for killing the unborn babies, just like Romney, but now he's against it, just like Romney has changed. He's also changed his once moderate stance on gay rights, a reversal that could spell trouble with the conservative base. Well,
but it's the old idea of divide and conquer. This is what they did. That's how they got Woodrow Wilson elected back in 1912, simply by running Teddy Roosevelt to actually block Taft so that Roosevelt would siphon off a lot of the votes. Exactly the same thing with Ross Perot. Obviously, they want to bring this man in, to try to divide the conservative movement, because Trump will try to give the impression he's conservative. He's not. He's not a Christian. He's not in favor of moral values, and he is not a moral individual. If he was, he would not be getting the big play that he is today.
Well, Donald Trump has been considered a Republican presidential bid, says now he's considering running in the 2012 election as an independent. In remarks he made to the Wall Street Journal, he said that there was concern about Republicans that he might run as independent if he does not win the GOP nomination. And he confirmed that he said he probably will run as an independent and believes that he could win, but certainly he can't win as a Republican, I don't think. Frankly, Trump has no chance of winning at all, but that's not really his purpose. All he has to do is split off a major percentage of anti-Obama vote, and he can stop any Republican from winning. That won't be hard to do.
Well, I think one only has to note that, he has his own television program. If he was an honest man, he would not have his own television program. He has to sell his soul to get all the publicity that he's getting. Certainly they've offered, their own television program to people like Alex Jones, but he had to agree not to talk about important things. They did the same thing to Jesse Ventura. They did the same thing to Eliot Spitzer. Obviously, Eliot Spitzer is never never going to tell the truth. At one time, he really tried to get the truth out. Now, of course, he has his own television program, and no way is he going to tell the truth. If he did, he'd end up like, of course, Glenn Beck. Go right ahead.
Well, the field is already getting crowded in the Republican thing as the media keeps promoting nearly half a dozen serious candidates and manipulating poll results to make them all look like they're potential winners. Mitt Romney is the strongest candidate overall in the Republican stable, despite attempts by the media to downplay his support and promote other competitors. He's got too much money, business acumen to be denied a major position in the race, but Romney may be his own worst enemy as he keeps trying to defend the indefensible, of course with bad advice from his established advisors. His unrepentant stand on Romney Care, which was another form of mandatory health insurance that he pushed through as governor of Massachusetts, I think will sink in with true conservatives. Political.com confirms this, saying, while Romney's polling second in Iowa, the hot state, the poll also points to a potential pothole in the road for Romney. 63% of Iowa's GOP say supporting a state-level health mandate is a disqualifier for them. Only 11% say they'll be willing to vote for someone who backed a state-level bill mandating voters have health insurance, as Romney did in Massachusetts. In reality, what may be a disqualifier in a primary certainly is not when a candidate is chosen and the Republicans band together to support their candidate against Obama. If Romney were to win the nomination, a lot of conservatives would support him. If they supported John McCain, another great hypocrite and deceiver, who aren't they capable of supporting? Still, the powers that be have Mike Huckabee in the things, ready to run against Romney should they need to pull the anti-Mormon card and use it among conservative Christians. That rerun of 2008 is still a factor today. Polls in Iowa, the first primary state, show Huckabee and Romney 27% to 16%. But Huckabee's not to be trusted either. He has carried a lot of water for the establishment when he was governor of Arkansas, which is a very corrupt and controlled state, and when he was a candidate during the last election cycle. When George H.W. Bush, a high-level insider in the government, or dark side of government, came out and said about 6 months ago that he thought Romney would make a good president, I thought perhaps the establishment might have decided they can control Romney. Anxious is he to please them in order to get elected. Now, that may still be true, but I think that they would rather not have someone like Romney, who, though overly ambitious, is not a true insider, not a conspirator in a secret movement to undermine American sovereignty. Romney's ambition and the hunger for the presidency makes him vulnerable to the influence of insiders who push the party line. But the powers that be would rather not have to deal with someone who's directly controlled like Romney, should the president see too much while in office, which is why they threw an assassination attempt at Reagan, which made him fairly competent afterwards. Well, Sarah Palin's campaign is dying as the media has been all too effective in pointing out lack of intellect on the issues. She's still hopeful and will be running during the primaries, even though I think she knows she can't win. At best, she'll qualify as a VP candidate because she still has a lot of media appeal, and that may be worth it for both her and the Republican establishment. Polling in Iowa shows Palin even with Ron Paul, and the only and I'm saying that with Ron Paul and Newt Gingrich, Ron Paul's the only candidate who, in my opinion, can never be bought or did. As for Newt Gingrich, he's announced he isn't run for president after placing very low in early polls at the CPAC and other strong conservative gatherings. Apparently, few have forgotten his betrayals where he was Speaker of the House.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment here. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and Joel is simply talking about the various candidates, the fact that certainly Newt Gingrich is apparently not going to be running for the presidency. Huckabee is certainly being kept in the background. Romney certainly has support with the establishment, but of course he's compromised himself. His worst mistake was Romney Care in Massachusetts, the medical care bill, which has just bankrupted that country. And if he was really a conservative, he never would have pushed a socialized medical program, especially one designed as this one has, which has been a disaster for the state of Massachusetts. So basically, of course, they're Sarah Palin probably, would not be a viable candidate. Ron Paul, well, Ron Paul certainly is, probably will be running, but of course he'll be attacked and vilified and demonized by the mass media. You pick up the story there, Joel.
Yeah, it's because Ron Paul is a virtually unviable candidate, person who can't be bought, can't be corrupted, and so they won't let him win. They just simply will not allow someone like that to enter in to politics. Now, as for Newt Gingrich, I was going to finish that I don't think Newt Gingrich has given up altogether, even though he said he's not going to run. After all, he's a key globalist wolf in sheep's clothing, just like Rudolph Giuliani, who's also thinking about running again, and has just written with his usual ghostwriter yet another political book, hoping to resurrect chances. A Nation Like No Other, Why American Exceptionalism Matters. This will be a justify all book in the military intervention and monetary hegemony that will further Newt's neocon legacy. A new book of Gingrich is always a sign that he's still maneuvering for power. So I haven't written Newt Gingrich off yet at all. And the fact that Rudolph Giuliani has no chance of winning and throwing his hat in the ring means they intend to simply split the conservatives and Republicans in as many pieces as they can to pave the way for Trump taking of the election.
How about Michelle Bachmann? Do you think that she has any hope at all? And now I understand that Judge Roy Moore is even talking about trying to run.
That's right. There's another guy from Texas that's throwing his hat. Oh, no, New Mexico, former governor in New Mexico, Johnson, is throwing his in the ring. Roy Moore is throwing his hat in the ring. That shows that there just isn't any satisfaction in any quarter of the Republican Party with what's being given. I think this disparate attempt to divide and factionalize the Tea Party movement is just going to be a great success, and it really shows then that, in fact, they're not going to, oust Obama. I think the handwriting is very clear. The establishment, just like in Clinton, is going to give Democrats a second term. Now, Michelle Bachmann is still in the running. She's not being given a lot of press, and she's not given a lot of polling results. And the way to keep a person from climbing in the polls is not to mention polls. That's why I think it's amazing that Ron Paul is up there with Palin. It shows that there's a tremendous amount of backing for Ron Paul, a lot more than the media is giving him credit for.
Well, it's going to be interesting, but of course they control the media, they control the reality of the American people. Until the American people understand the media is control, we are governed, our minds are molded, our taste formed, our ideas suggested largely by men we've never heard of. That's what Edward Bernays said back in 1928 in his book Propaganda, and he should know he was the father of modern-day propaganda and the molding of the American mind. So it's going to be fascinating what effect, of course, programs like this and your writings and your newsletters, there's a growing awareness across America that something is seriously wrong. And people are looking for answers, and certainly the good thing I can say is that a lot of our major newspapers are having real financial problems. A lot of our major television and radio networks are having real problems, and more people are turning to alternative radio and the Internet to try to find the truth. But go right ahead.
Well, this election cycle will be a wild ride with lots of people dropping out and new faces being promoted all the time until the establishment finds out what will work to deceive the American people again. If there's one thing conservatives know, it's that anyone being promoted by the establishment is compromised. There's only one thing that matters anymore to us, and that's the personal integrity and the absolute dependence of a candidate from the establishment powers. Meaning we cannot trust anyone who's been a part of the establishment who hasn't been fighting this for years and years. Only Ron Paul, in my opinion, qualifies in that regard. He simply is uncomfortable, and that's what we need today. We mustn't settle for anything less, no matter what they say or promise.
Amen to that. Actually, there's even been talk about Jesse Ventura, and I heard Jesse's interview where he said, well, he would run as vice president with Ron Paul. He wouldn't run for him if he was running on the Republican ticket, but if he was running as an independent, he would be the vice president. He would love to be the vice presidential candidate. Jesse's got a lot of natural appeal to the people who want a nonconformist, and he sure is. We'll be back here in just a moment. Our guest, of course, is Joel Skousen, but understand, ladies and gentlemen, the Brotherhood of Darkness controls both political parties.
While the storm clouds gather far across the sea, let us swear allegiance to a land that's free. Let us all be grateful for a land so fair. As we raise our voices in a solemn prayer.
Well, Joel, you go right ahead.
Well, thanks, Dan. I'm going to enter into a more controversial subject here now. I'm going to talk about a major controversy that has arisen with the Mormon Church in Utah. They're basically getting slammed for hypocrisy. Two important issues have set the church leadership at odds with its core conservative members. One, pandering to the gay, lesbian lobby and supporting a local anti-discrimination law for sexual orientation in Salt Lake County. And two, promoting a form of amnesty for illegal aliens in Utah, which passed the legislature this session. It's now being used and gloated about among the liberals and the Obama administration as a way in which to bypass the resistance. You could get conservative Utah to pass an amnesty for, there's hope for the whole nation, according to the pro-amnesty group. And it has enraged conservative Mormons in Utah because of the fact that they've dedicated so much of their time and energy to fighting immigration in the state. And now the main church in Utah to come out and support that has been very problematic. And for the first time has caused a lot of conservative members to doubt wisdom of their leadership. Well, let's talk about the gay lesbian outreach first. The first was particularly galling to members because the Mormon church leaders carved out an exception for the church, so the church itself would be exempt from the law's requirements, because homosexuality is condemned as immoral by the Mormon church. But it denied to the members themselves the right to discriminate in hiring, housing, and other business affairs. So constitutional conservative Mormons hold to the proposition that the right to associate and disassociate with whomever they wish is a fundamental right, even if the public may disagree with the reasons for that bias and consider it prejudice. And an astute editorial in the local Deseret or Daily Herald newspaper of Provo, Utah, made an issue of this dichotomy between church rights and the individual member rights. Conservatives were hopeful that the church would change course. After all, one of the apostles of the Mormon church is Dallin, who was a former conservative jurist from the Utah Supreme Court. Surely he would see the logical and legal flaws in the church position about carving out an exemption themselves from the anti-discrimination laws, but not allowing members to do so.
Hold that thought. We'll be back in just a moment. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and certainly Joel has really opened a can of worms here, because we're talking about certainly the Mormon church and the position of the church on one, illegal immigration, and two, on gay and lesbian issues, and certainly has whipped up a storm of protest from many of the conservatives in the Mormon church who've certainly been very much anti-illegal immigration and believe certainly that homosexuality is immoral. But before we go on, Joel, I want you to tell our listeners how they can get in touch with you, get a copy of your publication, and of course the great books that you've written, which incidentally are among our best sellers. I just asked my secretary today what the best sellers we have, and she said, well, Joel Skousen's book on strategic relocation and the secure home. And but why don't you put a pitch in for both your newsletter and your books, and then we'll get back to this issue, which I'm sure is going to be very divisive for the Mormon church. But go right ahead.
Well, thanks, Dan. My newsletter is the World Affairs Brief. It's put out every Friday. We're talking about the major issues we'll discuss in tomorrow's brief. If people want to get a free sample copy, they can email me at editor@worldaffairsbrief.com. This is going to be a controversial issue, as you have warned about, because it is a major controversy among a church which has normally been very conservative, and the leaders are now showing some liberal tendencies which are very disturbing. My other books, also show up on my website, joelskousen.com, are The Secure Home, my major 700-page treatise on how to do everything relative to security and sufficiency on a home or retreat. Strategic Relocation, the brand new third edition, is out now with all maps. 75% of the text has all been rewritten. Complete section on international retreating now. It's a bestseller, and that's all. Those books are available at Radio Liberty, plus my book, How to Implement a High Security Shelter in the Home. So I encourage people to get those and be prepared as we fight for liberty.
And ladies and gentlemen, we're moving into some very, very difficult conditions. Let me tell you that inflation is starting here, and that this is going to lead to tremendous civilian unrest. We're talking probably within a couple of years that the inflation rate will be to the point where many people are going to have, difficulty of functioning at 20-30% inflation. Can come down. If it does, it will impact on everybody's way of life, and specifically on the elderly and certainly the people having difficulty, getting a job. But be that as it may, America is moving into a period of chaos and crisis, and you should be prepared for that time when the America we know no longer exists. How will you and your family survive? These are great books: Strategic Relocation, The Secure Home. All three are available by calling 1-800-544-8927. Go right ahead, Joel.
Well, as I say, conservatives in Utah were hoped the church would see the position. The editorial by the Daily Herald was so very clear. It was written by a non-Mormon, but it out. I mean, how can the church claim an exemption and push a law putting anti-discrimination for gay and deny to their very members the same exemption under the law, who hold to the same tenets as the church? But the next confrontation between gays and the church spokesman went so far as to throw out the example of church support for the anti-discrimination law as an example of how much they are for their outreach towards gays. In fact, the church has gained nothing but derision from the gay lesbian community, despite bending over backwards to make homosexuals feel comfortable among the Mormons. Gay, lesbian, transgender organizations continue to harass, picket, and protest all things Mormon. They will never forgive the church for encouraging its members to get out the vote for California Proposition 8. Even the outreach to gay lesbians within the church has backfired. The church stopped the practice of automatically excommunicating all professed homosexuals and allowed them to keep their membership and standing in the church on condition they remain celibate. Now that extended to them the very same policy the church has for heterosexuals who may, for example, be attracted to someone opposite sex, but don't do anything about it. The church does still recognize lust as a sin, but still hard to prove. However, the church has neglected to include in the new informal deal with celibate gays a provision that they must assent to the biblical doctrine that homosexuality is considered a sin by God, and that they must promote their homosexuality to others. Without that latter agreement, Mormon homosexual groups became even more proud and adamant about their position and kept pushing for more acceptance within the church. When the church went out of its way to call an openly gay man to a local position of authority, a councilman in Berkeley, California, no less, it only provided more fuel to the fire of legitimacy. The new high counselor was heard by one of my subscribers speaking from the pulpit at the Mormon church, reveling in being called as the first person to leadership and what that portended towards greater acceptance of lifestyle. So you see, the point I'm making is that the Mormon church, by not requiring that not only that they be celibate, that they accept the doctrine that this is sin by God, and they not promote it, they've basically given people a license to parade about it, proud about the fact that I'm a homosexual, I'm an active Mormon, and I can get away with it. Well, that kind of open promotion of gay persons to leadership in the church can only end up causing numerous conflicted youth to feel free to experiment and drift towards the gay lifestyle. The church has unwisely opened a Pandora's box and won't be able to do that box without tremendous antagonism in the gay community and much loss of faith, errors which the church leaders have been historically loath to accept. Well, perhaps there exists a fundamental failure among the leaders, despite their good intentions of trying to placate a growing threat to the church, to recognize that gays will never be satisfied with anything less than full acceptance of homosexual behavior as normal and moral by the church, which will never happen. It's just too deeply inside the biblical doctrine which the church accepts. In the meantime, the resulting policy of placating homosexuals with leadership positions in anti-discrimination laws will only cause more to be drawn into that lifestyle and restrict the rights of members to shield themselves and their children from the onslaught of gay and lesbian demands for acceptance in the community. That's why I'm very much against anti-discrimination laws. I think discrimination is a fundamental right of all people to exclude who they will deal with. And though we may not like the reason people use to discriminate, it is a right for people to do so, just like free speech. No one has a right to demand that people accept them or do business or rent them. We have the right to discriminate. Well, relative to Utah's amnesty problem, in the second case promoting amnesty for illegals, the church has run squarely up against the charge of hypocrisy, having made absolute obedience to secular law one of the cardinal doctrines of faith in the church. Many conservative Mormons recalled the church excommunicating other Mormons who were tax protesters, even when their objection to the tax was based on the principle that the income tax was improper and unconstitutional. The church has refrained to beleaguered conservatives who dislike the growing unconstitutional and evil trend of law. Well, go change it. Of course, being a minority, that's rarely possible in today's society. And yet the church, relative to illegal immigrants, has been knowingly going against the law in several ways and hiding it from ordinary members. A few years ago, in 2005, the church asked Utah Senator Orrin Hatch to get an exemption to law quietly passed that would absolve religious organizations like the Mormons from criminal liability for knowingly allowing undocumented illegal immigrants to provide missionary service for the church. That's how the church allows undocumented immigrants to serve missions in the U.S. But church members were totally aware of the silent policy of calling missionaries in the U.S. here illegally, because it would highlight a contradiction on the church's position on obeying the law of the land. Now, normal Mormons would be denied permission to enter temples if they were found guilty of knowingly disobeying laws. That's how strict it is in the church. And yet the church is knowingly calling illegal aliens as missionaries and giving them temple recommends, knowing that they were in open violation of immigration laws. This all came to light when an illegal and alien Mormon missionary ending his mission in April of 2009. He was arrested on his return flight from Cincinnati because he didn't have a driver's license or a passport. In a public statement regarding the incident, the church neglected to mention the subject of how an illegal alien got called to him in the first place. It's the first the church had revealed that they were calling illegals. No one knew before that. What was the resolution? Rather than air, the church simply changed the travel arrangements for all undocumented missionaries and had relatives drive them home instead of fly. So you can see, Stan, why so many of the conservative members of the church are upset about this. It wouldn't be quite as bad if the church had openly said that, but then they would have had to have admitted that they don't believe that all secular law should be obeyed. In fact, I think that's problematic doctrine anyway. I think God does not expect us to obey all laws, only those conform to the laws of God and the laws of fundamental rights of men. Well, members are fairly easily placated about the foregoing episode due to high justification all things missionary play within the church, but not so the latest dust-up when the church played a rather heavy lobbying role in getting the legislature to pass Utah's version of amnesty for illegals. This was even more disturbing to members because the church often claims it does not actively lobby when it does. Some of us libertarian conservatives who are politically astute don't mind if it lobbies, as long as they are honest and upfront about it. The church has as much right as any organization representing citizens to use its influence, IRS policies notwithstanding. But claiming one thing is inappropriate for a church to claim. Claiming to represent the Lord, I think it's very important that a church be honest in their dealings with what they're doing. Church secret lobbying came to light years ago when the Chinese government privately appealed to the church to get its members in Congress to back Chinese entrance into the World Trade Organization. The church made its wishes known in secret, and every congressman under its influence complied. Only later, when conservative outrage took aim at removing Congressman Cannon for having supported Chinese ascension to the World Trade Organization, did he admit privately to one person who happened to have told me that the church had lobbied all Mormons in Congress. Cannon also did the bidding of church leaders, began pushing for a comprehensive immigration reform bill that George Bush was promoting, which was an amnesty bill. Cannon was punished for his compromises by losing the Republican primary to Jason Chaffetz in 2008 over these and other issues. And Jason Chaffetz has done a much better job in Congress than Cannon did. Up until this current crisis, most conservative members would never have believed that the church was lobbying for arch-enemy China or for lesbian rights or for illegal aliens. Even now, the church is having to deal with calls from a few astonished conservatives who are almost all uniformly united against the illegal immigration bill, asking if it's really true that the church pushed for this amnesty. Mormon conservatives have such uncompromising faith in their leaders that they often believe something is wrong until the church admits it, which they only do in euphemistic terms. The church on Red News, for example, would only repeat the church's justification about doctrine while avoiding any admission that the church was supporting that which violated a current law. Coming from the Deseret News, which is the church newspaper, they said more than 2,400 people have signed an online petition supporting a repeal of this bill, the Utah Guest Worker Program. The other three immigration bills in the package approved during the 2011 legislature provided for increased enforcement of migrant worker program and employer verification. But they were done knowing that the courts would rule the increased enforcement invalid, just like in Arizona, leaving the guest worker program intact. The Obama administration is lauding Utah as a prelude to a national solution, and that's why Mormon conservatives are very upset with the church's position on this. The full post on newslds.org reads, members of the public who contact the church public affairs and asking for the church's position have been given the following response. And maybe there are more than just a few that were calling in. Quote, the church has spoken a number of times about the issue of immigration, specifically spoken in support of the Utah Compact. Utah Compact's a crafted statement, this is my comment, giving lip service to enforcement but promoting the, quote, gentler response to illegal immigration. This was the church's code words to people that were for amnesty without having to say it. And it's described of bills passed by the Utah legislature taken together as a responsible approach to the difficult questions of immigration. They say the church's position is based on three principles: the commandment to love thy neighbor, the importance of keeping families intact, and three, the federal government's obligation to secure its borders. The reason they mentioned the third was to imply that it's not the state's responsibility to enforce, but the federal, and if they're not going to, then we're free to give amnesty. So no mention of obeying the existing land, which is also a cardinal doctrinal position of the church, probably because that is, and not a few members have shaken up by this obvious hypocrisy. Instead of putting together a principled statement on the rightness or wrongness of various types of law, the church is choosing to arbitrarily disobey laws which get in the way of its missionary goals and force members to obey other laws, no matter how bad, if it doesn't affect the church. That's not a principled way to handle these problems of bad laws. The Salt Lake Tribune, which traditionally been the anti-Mormon paper in Utah, openly addressed how this latest controversy has caused many conservative Mormons to rethink their traditional unconditional support of every position taken by church leaders. Quote, amid a steady trickle of questions from LDS members and a swelling stream of political criticism of state worker guest law, the church is repeating its support. But it has also came at a time of renewed debate among members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons, about the faith leadership's stance on immigration, the intensity of the church's lobbying position during recent legislative session. Ron Mortensen, a Mormon who's opposed to any kind of amnesty for undocumented immigrants, believes the church statement was triggered by many calls to church headquarters. He said, GOP convention delegates, the majority of whom are LDS members, approved a resolution calling for the repeal of Utah's new guest worker law at the earliest possible occasion. The resolution criticizing the law as unconstitutional and giving entitlements to illegal immigration passed in the convention despite a plea from the governor, Gary Herbert, to not do that.
Well, this is really going to be a tremendous split in the church, isn't it? Because don't most of the conservative Mormons really have very strong feelings about illegal immigration and the moral issues, and this is a very, very divisive issue.
Yeah, it really is, Dr. Stan, especially about the amount of lobbying that went on in the church to turn faithful Mormons against illegal immigration to get them to vote for this, and they're mad about it now.
All right, we're going to be back in just a moment. Our guest is Joel Skousen, because I'm sure this is a very personal issue for Joel, who I know is very conservative and very concerned about all of these issues. But certainly we find these forces at work, I fear, in all of our major religions, certainly turning away from the traditional values that we had certainly all held and now increasingly being compromised. Well, our guest is Joel Skousen, and of course our program, Radio Liberty. We'll be back in a moment to wrap up the program. Well, Joel, this is going to be a very divisive issue, and what do you think the outcome will be?
Well, I don't think that it's going to make, it's just going to cause conservatives to go further underground in the Mormon Church. Unfortunately, there's been a long-term policy that anyone who holds to strict constitutional value, shouldn't be called to high leadership, and yet they'll call even a gay person to provide outreach to those. So more and more conservatives in the church are feeling beleaguered, just as conservative Catholics are feeling more beleaguered in the church, which is, promoted some globalists. And as a faithful Mormon, it's been very disconcerting to me. The real reason behind this is not to show compassion and mercy to illegal aliens. The church has always had that position. Basically, there's two overriding passions that have driven the policies of the church in the past 20 years. That's missionary work and gaining acceptance within the world. There's nothing wrong with two goals as long as one doesn't sacrifice one's principles, and that's the rub, the signs of compromise, purposeful blindness to the problems and the compromises here causing many conservatives to have real consternation. I think it's going to be a healthy thing in the long term because it will cause conservative Mormons to think more about the decisions of their leaders and get confirmation of the spirit of them rather than having this rote follow the leader no matter what they say. So I think that will be helpful.
Well, I think it will be as well. Well, I certainly will be interested in looking over your shoulder and following this issue. And in the past, I found that if I commented on the Mormon faith, I got into all sorts of problems. So I'm just going to sit on the sidelines and be like that unidentifiable source who declined to be quoted but said off the record that he had no comment. But, Joe, we've got about a minute for you to wrap up the program.
Well, I want people to understand that I'm not taking this because I'm attacking the church. I think the church has done a great deal of good in the world, and especially in developing people who have done a lot to promote families and good, healthy living. But I think there is a problem when you proclaim to be the true church and the best and have a representative and prophet of God, and you make mistakes. The expectations of perfection are very hard to live up to, and neither the church nor the leaders nor the are perfect, nor are they in any Christian church, so we all have to be mindful of that people do mistakes. And
yes, we have the same problem in the Protestant church, but the nice thing is I don't have to follow their advice. That gives me a certain element of freedom. God bless you, Joel. We'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow morning.
Thank you very much.
God bless, and thanks so much. And of course, our guest is a good friend, Joel Skousen, who, of course, feels very deeply about this issue, and very justifiably so. Well, this is Dr. Stan, and certainly we hope you enjoy our conversation with Joel Skousen and this issue of certain leaderships within the church taking positions which are not moral. And of course, the nice thing, from my point of view, as I happen to be a Protestant, there's been infiltration of the Protestant church, of the Protestant hierarchy. Certainly when we find that the man who led the National Association of Evangelical Christians, 30 million members of Protestants, turned out to be a cocaine snorting homosexual. Well, of course, this created quite this concerning, but we have to understand they have infiltrated, in my estimation, the hierarchy of the Protestant Church, the Catholic Church, the Mormon Church, the Jewish religion. These dark demonic forces are everywhere. The nice thing about the Protestant faith is I'm not required to follow the leadership of any man. My loyalty is to the Bible and to my personal relationship with our Lord. Well, certainly to understand the true nature of the battle that's going on today, for the souls of men and the survival of Christian civilization, let me suggest my book, Brotherhood of Darkness, and or the DVD, because it's all the same story. You need to hear my talk in addition on the forbidden secret and of the dark secret, and get the syllabuses that go with that. And you'll really learn a lot about the very real spiritual battle that's going on today, and the fact that we live in a material world, but there's a mystical world. We live in a subjective world, but there is a spiritual world. We live in a visible world, but there is an invisible world. And when you begin to understand that we're involved in a spiritual battle for the souls of men, but it's being fought on a political, ideological, and cultural battlefield, and the forces aligned against humanity are powerful beyond a human belief, but then, of course, we're dealing with not human forces. So once you begin to understand that there really are secret societies. If you've never heard my 4-tape set on the Skull and Bones Society, certainly both George Herbert Walker and George W. Bush were members of Skull and Bones. We have a book on that, The Secrets of the Tomb. We have a 4-tape set on the Bohemian Grove. George Herbert Walker Bush, George W. Bush were members. And, of course, you need, of course, get the DVD on Skull and Bones, put together by Alex Jones, who snuck into the Bohemian Grove. And there you see the leaders of our country with their hoods and their capes and their candles and their chants in front of the creature that they revere. That's the owl. And we each have their writings from their secret books. We'll be glad to send you the simple one page out of the book, which was never to be revealed to anybody, quite very difficult to get, where they talk about revering the owl. Who is the owl? Where they hold the feigned human sacrifice. Why, of course, it is the owl is Moloch, the symbol of evil. If you have not yet got and heard our 2 4-CD sets, the talks that Dr. Cuddy gave here on the afternoon program, but you need to listen to them several times. There's so much information there. There's no better researcher that we have than Dr. Dennis Cuddy. And we have the Illuminati Part 1, Illuminati Part 2, each with 4 CDs. They will take you into the Bohemian Grove. They will take you into Skull and Bones. They will take you into the Illuminati and from whence it came and, of course, what its influence is today. There really are secret societies, ladies and gentlemen. America is largely run today from 5080 68th Street in New York City. And there that we have, of course, that's the headquarters of the Council on Foreign Relations. What do we know about the Council on Foreign Relations? Well, you need to read Professor Quigley's book, both Tragedy and Hope and the Anglo-American Establishment. He was a liberal who actually taught at both Harvard and Princeton before he went to Georgetown University and met his most famous student, Bill Clinton. I've been to Professor Quigley's papers. We copied them, spent weeks back at Georgetown. Was there really a secret society? Yes, ladies and gentlemen. And today they control the United States. And working, of course, through their branches in other countries like the Royal Institute for International Affairs in England, at Chatham House, they control Great Britain, and they control all of the English-speaking nations. Understand nothing as it appears to be. Our number 1-800-544-8927. 1-800-5-HIV-WAR.